Welcome to the Freedom Club podcast, where we discuss the fight for freedom, fulfillment, passion, and purpose. Your host is Curt Gallup certified strengths coach and agency founder who is dedicated to coaching individuals seeking to level up their lives and businesses. The Freedom Club is about unlocking your talents, turning them into strengths, and crushing your objectives. You can learn more at freedomclub.gcscoach.com. Welcome to the Freedom Club.
This is the Freedom Club podcast. I am your host, Curt Mercadante. As you know, every Monday morning, I bring you the Monday Motivator segment, which is a short burst of motivation to help you kick your week off on the right foot. And every Thursday is the interview segment, in which I interview a business leader or some other all-around interesting person. And today, we have both a business leader and an all-around interesting person, Mike Johnson from Cody, Wyoming. Mike, how are you doing today?
Pretty fair. Thanks a lot for having me.
Absolutely. And Mike and I met 2 weeks ago at I call it a conference, but it was more of a collaboration, get-together, therapy session, brainstorming in Denver. It's organized by someone named Sarah Elkins. She organizes for the second straight year. It's mostly made up of people who came together and either met each other or Sarah on LinkedIn. And it's wonderful, people from different industries. And that's where Mike and I met.
That's correct. That was a fun trip.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, Mike had a pamphlet. He had a letter that we're going to talk about. But Mike, you are an entrepreneur, a business owner, a journalist. How do you describe yourselves when people ask you, what do you do?
I tell them I'm retired, and I guess I'm prouder of that than anything. I made the journey, I made the journey from jobs to freelance writer to entrepreneur to passive income, and figured out how to get passive income, which gave me the financial and time freedom to retire. And I wish I'd have squished the journey shorter, but it took what it took. But I retired when I was 52.
Wow. That's the dream, right? And I ask, and I'll ask you in a second, but the first question I always ask all my guests is, what does the word freedom mean to you? And while there's common threads in everyone's answers, they're all unique. And so far, no one's answer has just been financial or just been, political. It envelops, a whole variety of things, doing what you want, when you want, with whom you want. So Mike, what does the word freedom mean to you?
To me, it means waking up and having a clear schedule. I get to pick what I want to do on most days and most times of the day. In fact, I have a calendar that, only has 2 dates on it for the next 35 days, and you're one of them. So I only got one of the things scheduled this week, and I like to keep it that way. And what happens when you get a taste of the freedom is you really try to resist scheduling everything unless you really want to do it, because the schedule forces you to be there. And I've had to be there for decades of my other work and my other businesses. And now I don't have to be there. So I love that freedom. I love that feeling of just whatever I want to do today, I can do.
This is, what I get a lot of incoming messages, calls when I put up a LinkedIn video, and a lot of it relates to, I talk about the word freedom a lot. And whenever I do a video, whether it's on the weekend or on a Monday morning, about, do you dread Mondays? Did you have tightness in your chest when you got out of bed this morning? When I talk to people about that, it resonates with so many people, and I used to be that way as well. It goes to a sense of loss of control over their day, over their lives, not just when they walk through the doors of their workplace at 9 a.m. or 8:30 a.m., but when they wake up, they feel like they're not in control of their lives. And as we were talking about offline, it's not just a Monday. It's not just that week or that year. It's this plan that they've been sold, that they've been told is the key to success, where you have to be miserable or in a comfort zone of misery until you're 65 in the hopes that you're still alive, right, or healthy enough then to enjoy it. And everything you're about is counter to that.
It is. And it was a journey. And you can't do things faster than you actually did them. But when you know something and you look back and you go, wow, how I really could have compressed this if I'd have known that there were other options, and I was the same way. I was raised with, go to school, get a good job, work really hard, try to get promoted, and then save some money and try to retire when you can. And, you know, I wasn't even given the option to start a business. I had to figure that out on my own. And then I realized that freelance writing was a way to control my time better. And that worked for a while. And then the entrepreneurial deal of starting a business, you know, that worked out really well too. However, you still had to be there. You still were on a schedule, you know. Even in your own business, you're wearing some sort of a uniform or a costume, and you're catering to people that maybe you didn't want to cater to in that particular moment. And so I finally learned that passive income is the way to go, because trading time for money just keeps you trapped. There's other ways to earn money than trading time for money.
And I want to get to the passive income, but if you could run us through kind of your journey from you're out of college, moving through, and I want to get it then into the $1 million letter that you wrote to your friend about, you know, the first one to become a millionaire writes a letter and tells us how they do it. Tell us about that journey and how it worked into your kind of realization that the system is broken.
Okay, sure. Well, the system I followed was I wanted money when I was a young kid. And I knew that if I didn't do some sort of work, I wasn't going to get money. I didn't have parents who were just going to hand me money. So, you know, it was paper routes for 6 years. I was the richest kid on my block because I had 2 paper routes and the paper stop at my house. And, you know, once I got a flavor of that, I wanted to keep that. I didn't go to college. I was a high school graduate. I went to work at McDonald's in high school. And I met a kid named Greg Mazel. And this guy I owe so much to, and I've never even told him. I've tried, but I haven't found him. Greg was a runner at McDonald's. Everybody else walked to go get the orders and fill them. Greg physically ran. And it looked weird, you know, and as a high school kid, I thought he was weird. But when I looked a little closer, I found out, look, he got the most hours, he got the best hours, he got the days off he wanted, he got the biggest raises. Well, my dad moved us to Florida when I was just going into my senior year of high school, which I hated, but I went to work at McDonald's down there. I had a chance to reinvent myself. Guess who became the Greg Mazel down at the Florida McDonald's? I saw it worked, and damn if it didn't work for me. So the next thing you know, they're running me through their management program, and my dad always said, you know, fellow, you need a trade, you know, so you have something to fall back on. And I said, you know, Dad, management is a trade. You know, I can fall back on management. Let me learn this. And so by the time I was 21, I was running the busiest McDonald's in Fort Myers, Florida. It's doing over $1 million a year. And I was a 21-year-old kid, and I had 50 employees and 10 assistant managers. And so that was my training in business and in life and people skills. The McDonald's training was extremely good, and that was good for me. That got me into the world.
Sure. So where did you end up after McDonald's?
Well, I was there for about 6 years. I went to 7-Eleven. I became a supervisor trainee. And once again, I figured out a way to become the boss's rabbit, do what they wanted the best and fastest way so that they'd point at me to say, do it like him. So I'd get the best hours, the biggest promotions, the raises. And I ended up running 55 stores. I was a district manager. I was with them for about 10 years.
Did you have a sense of feeling trapped as you were doing that job?
Oh yeah, that job sucked for a long time. Out of the 10 years, that was a bad job for a lot of those years. The last 4 were great because I reached a high enough level where I called the shots. I set my own schedule. I set the priorities. And I like to say I got the bosses to dance to my tune instead of me dancing to theirs. And the way you do that is you pepper your superiors with new ideas. And of course, some of them have to be good and they have to work. But once they do, all of a sudden, every time they call you on the phone to tell you to do something, you're asking them to do 2 more things for you, which is, hey, these 2 new ideas, I need your help on these. They stop calling you. They start letting you do your ideas. And the next thing you know, you're running your own show.
Yeah. But you're still working for someone else. You're still trading your time for money.
Yes.
Is it at that point that you decided, I'm going to try something else? I'm going to start my own business?
I have a burning desire since 6th grade to become a writer. And I had tried it on the side several times, McDonald's, 7-Eleven on the side. And I finally reached a point where I said, I'm 34 and I've gone nowhere with this writing. And 7-Eleven, I've gone as far as I want to go. I don't want to transfer to get the next highest job. I'm going to quit and become a writer. And I had a year's worth of money, and I quit to be a freelance writer, and everybody thought I was insane. Turns out they were right.
Insane in a good way or insane in a bad way? Were they right?
Well, I went through all my money in a year, didn't have any clients. So I ended up working for a community newspaper for 10 hours a week. My evil plan was, if I can get my foot in the door, then maybe they'll let me start being a writer and a reporter, which worked. And so now I'm working 40 hours. I'm helping them put the paper together and paste it up and put it on prints and write headlines and take pictures and report stories. And then I made the mistake. The editor asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, well, one day I'd like to hold your position. I'd like to see how you're doing it and work my way up. And she was insecure and I had weaknesses. And so she cut me loose. Oh. So we started our own newspaper, which was.
Where is this at?
This was in Pine Island, Florida.
Okay.
And we had no money. So we threw together a mock-up of what the newspaper would look like, just using a copy machine and a little art. And I went around and I sold $4,000 worth of advertising to people. I'd give them $4,000 if they'd pay me $1,000 in cash now, so I could start the newspaper. And I actually sold 8 of those packages. Really? And I used the $8,000 to go buy the printer and the computers that I needed to start the business. And we did that for 3 years and almost killed ourselves, and finally had to shut it down.
You ended up putting your former paper where you worked out of business?
I wish that was the case. We did a survey and the readers preferred us 62% to 38%. So I thought, vindication. And we got 80% of all the advertisers on the island, which was great, but they hedged their bets. They didn't want to piss off the other newspapers, so they kept ads in that paper and with us. And that was a chain with deep pockets. So they outran us, and then we were just exhausted working so hard, trapped in our print schedule. But 12 years of education crammed into 3. And then everything we've done after that is turned to gold because of that education we got in the newspaper days.
Interesting. How so?
Well, we had to start all over. We filed bankruptcy. We got a fresh start. We could move anywhere in the world we wanted. We did our research, and as a kid, I'd always wanted to go to Wyoming, and we ended up in Cody, Wyoming. And the day after our bankruptcy cleared, I landed a freelance writing job for a newsletter company that paid more money than what I had earned at 7-Eleven, and only working 20 hours a week and doing it as a freelancer. And why did I get that job? Because of all of my newspaper experience.
Interesting.
So it took me going through that to become the person that I had wanted to be as a freelancer. So now I could live anywhere. It felt like the burden of the world. We went from 100-hour weeks to 20-hour weeks, from 95 degrees in Florida to 65 degrees with mountains in Wyoming. It was a miracle. And we rode that for another 6 years. And then we started our trolley tour company, which worked out tremendous.
In Cody, Wyoming.
Yes. It turns out that, Cody's named after Buffalo Bill Cody. He was the most famous man in the world in the 1900s, and he created the town. So there's all kinds of fascinating history here. Well, they have a fantastic museum here that does a great job of sharing the history of the area and Buffalo Bill inside, but nobody was showing the history outside in the town that he built. So I even wrote a good article on this one, and it was that, over the years, so many people had written articles for a few $100 or written books for a few $1,000, or even done tourist books where you sell a bunch of ads and then put some history in there and make $20,000. But I decided, let's write a 1-hour tour, deliver it by 2 people, put it on a trolley, which just markets extremely well and is just fun, and do a 24-mile tour around the town, and do it in the summer when we have all this Yellowstone traffic. We get 500,000 people come through Cody. It's a 10,000 population town, but we get that in the summer months. So we started it, and the first year broke even. The second year tripled in business, and it was off to the races after that.
A lot of, when I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, they have a whole history of strings of defeats or failures, and they're proud of it. And, you know, I've always been a believer in failing fast. Try something new. If it doesn't work, you take your punch, you learn from it, and you move on. But then there's some people who don't ever take that first step because they're afraid, they're fearful. You took a number of steps. You know, freelance writer didn't work out. Start a newspaper, didn't work out. At that point, most people would say, not meant to be, holding up shop, I'm heading back home, tail between my legs. You just kept pushing through with an idea for a trolley tour, which was nothing like you had ever done before. And it was a success. But if it hadn't been a success, I have a feeling you would have said, okay, we learned, let's move on and start something else.
Yeah. And we've always done everything with no money, which is, you know, the hardest possible way to do it. We started the trolley company with $2,000, and we went out and once again, we sold advertising. Newspaper experience helped us do that. We created ads on the side of the trolley, ads in the trolley. We created a book that people got when they rode on the trolley that had all kinds of history. So there's advertising in there. And when I visited the people I was selling ads to, I said, don't give me any money now. Just sign a commitment that says, you know, when we start this trolley tour, when we get the trolley, you'll participate. So I took their letters with my $2,000 down to the bank and a business plan, which we did, which you never did in the newspaper. We learned, do a business plan. And sure enough, they gave us a loan. We bought a used trolley and it was off to the races.
So in the letter you wrote, the millionaire letter, how did you break through that $1 million threshold? Was it the trolley tour, or was it what happened after the trolley tour? It enabled you to go on and kind of have an awakening financially?
It was a parlay of everything. With a bankruptcy, you can't get a new house automatically. Wyoming had a program to buy a house for less than $1,000 down. So we got a house when we came to Wyoming as fast as we could, 97, 98, right in there. And then we used that house and the writing income to help convince the trolley loan with things I already told you about. And then when we had the trolley gone, we parlayed that equity and that income to convince the bank to let us buy a mobile home park, because I wanted passive income. As much as I was only working 6 months a year on the trolley, I wanted to reach the point where I didn't have to work at all. You know, I think people are wired to always try to better their situation. So on buying the trailer park, I just did a bunch of my own self-education and research. I read a lot of articles from people that had already done that. And I immersed myself, and I visited 4 parks before I found the park that we bought, which happened to be in Cody, Wyoming. The timing just had to be calibrated perfect. If I'd gone to that park first, it wasn't for sale. I never would have got it. We convinced the bank to let us buy it with $1,000 down. We had the seller carry 30%. The bank is always willing on commercial property, if it pencils out, to borrow up to 70% of the appraised value. So the seller got 70% of his money at closing. The bank knew that if they ever had to take the property back, they only had 70% into it, so they'd get their money back. And the seller was willing to risk the 30% down, but they wanted their money in 5 years. So we set it up so that if I would make payments to them as if the loan was for 20 years, so I wasn't creamed with a big mortgage payment for those 5 years. And then at the end of 5 years, I had to pay them the balance of what I had left. And it turns out within the 5 years, we were able to raise rents, lower expenses, get the equity up. So we refinanced. We were able to pay off the sellers 30% we owed them, had a new loan, and there it was. We got a trailer park for $1,000 down. So we ran that, and it was a mess. So we reinvested all of the money, lived off the trolley money while we fixed up the trailer park. And then in 2009, we sold the trolley. We used a big chunk of the cash we got out of that to buy a second mobile home park in a neighboring town that was in much better shape. And that gave us enough passive income to be done.
Wow. And here you are in a log cabin in Wyoming, feeling free. With only 2 things on your calendar over the next month.
Yes. But if I was 25, I'd say, if I could just learn how to buy an already existing business or income property, I could retire to 26 instead of 52. So they never give you that option that you don't have to save and invest they say that you're $1 million, then you're going to live off that passive income of the interest. Well, they never tell you that you can buy $1 million property with $1,000 down and gain enough passive income today to pay all your expenses, pay a big mortgage, pay a manager to run it, and pay all your personal bills too, and now be 95% off of any work schedule and be done.
And you just manage the managers.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's an option that people need to know is out there. Now, it's not for everybody because, you know, people have various comfort levels and stress levels and the whole schmeal. But I self-educated. I didn't go to college. I didn't go to seminars for these. I read books. I read websites. I took action. I visited with sellers. I talked to bankers. What's your qualifications? And then I just kept taking action until it worked.
So the millionaire letter, which you handed out on a thumb drive, I'm hoping you didn't put any, you didn't take all my credit card info somehow off my computer, you know. But so the millionaire letter, you know, a lot of people would hear that, and I want to ask you how it came about. But it's, you know, how to get to $1 million, how to become a millionaire. A lot of people would think, well, put your head down, work hard, grind every day, you know, go to a 4-year university, get your degree, and turn it into something. You've already hinted at this. This is nothing like that. I mean, this is not, like you said, if you had this when you were a 25-year-old, you would have retired at 26 instead of 32. So you talk about the passive income, you talk about getting to that point where you can make your money work for you rather than trading your time for money. Most people will read this letter and not do anything in it out of a sense of fear. Why do you think that is?
I think it's conditioning. And I think it's a new idea to most people. And when everybody else is doing something different, the mentality is to follow the herd. And, you know, if they haven't spent any time researching me or reading my articles on LinkedIn, you know, I'm new. You know, I can't jump into their life with this idea and have somebody embrace it without, you know, they'll have too much fear, uncertainty, and doubt, you know. So I always tell people when you pick a mentor or you are following someone, pick somebody that's already done what you want to achieve. You know, they don't have theory, they have results. They did it. You know, they know what the roadblocks are going to be. Too many people, especially in the financial industry, I mean, I have another article out there, why isn't your financial planner retired? You know, if he's so good at it, why is he out there still selling stuff to you? You know, why isn't he off in the log cabin somewhere? You know, so he's selling a product and he's selling you that he has the ability to get you to where you want to get, but he hasn't gotten there yet. So I wouldn't listen to him. I'd listen to somebody who has already got to where you want to get. So that's my argument for me with a new idea. You know, at least I've done it, but I'm not the only one. And trailer parks aren't the only thing to buy to get passive income. You know, maybe you want to be a restaurateur or you want to have a bowling alley chain, you know, there's other ways to do it. The whole game is just to get something with enough income that pays its expenses, pays a mortgage, pays a manager, and still throws off enough cash to pay all your bills. If your monthly nut's $5,000, all you need is $5,000 and $1 in monthly income to be free of jobs and schedules forever. Because that business or that income property is now your job, but you don't have to work a schedule. Your manager's working the schedule. So
use the word conditioning. And, you know, I don't think it's just a matter of you being new or people just reading you. I think if you were, who knows, Tony Robbins, right? It was somebody with a name and selling it. I think that conditioning does play a part in that, you know, people have been taught one way for so long that anything new, whether that's, I remember when I was just starting out, had to be about 23, hated my job, toxic work environment. And my friend said, well, you have a job. You just should be happy. That's the way it is. And I think that is the prevalent attitude that's out there. And I think that it's just going to take, it's like anything in society, right? You need to change the culture before you start changing behaviors. And the culture isn't there yet. It's still this notion of, I think it's improving. I think that there is a I mean, hell, there's a $9.9 billion self-help industry because there's a lot of people out there who lack purpose, who are in jobs they hate, that are maybe not just toxic, but day after day after day, they have this feeling that they're just existing.
Right.
But they're fearful. You know, when people talk to me about possibly coming in my coaching program, the people who don't come in, they say it's money. It's not money, because I have people in my coaching program who on paper you wouldn't think would be able to afford it. It's fear. It's something different. They're going to have to step out of a comfort zone that they know. And, you know, comfort zones can be miserable. It sounds counterintuitive, but so the millionaire, so how did the letter come about? I think that's such an interesting story.
Okay. Well, my buddy and I, we had promised that whoever became a millionaire first would tell the other one how he did it. And I finally woke up one day, and I'm a net worth millionaire. I'm not a millionaire with $1 million cash in the bank. My assets are over $1 million. So, and I have this steady income that allows me to be free of jobs, and it replenishes every month. So it's wonderful. So I'm done. You know, I'm done working. But I wanted to, when we looked at our financials and realized it was back in like 2006, I think, within 10 years of filing bankruptcy, we'd crossed the $1 million threshold. And it was a combination of the trolley and the trailer park and our other stuff that put us over that. So I thought, I did it. I need to think about how I'm going to do this. And I started thinking of Dave, and I didn't do anything for a long time. And Dave's a mainstream guy. And I finally wrote Dave the letter. I think it was 2013 or 2014. And he thought it was really interesting. And frankly, he's a save and invest guy. And he's done way better than I thought he would, but he's save and invest. But I said, this letter is going to work for my family. This letter is going to work for the people I mentor. This letter deserves to be out there in the world. And so that's how it came about.
And, one of the headers in the letter is the secret you're never taught in school or life. And underneath that, you write, the rich buy assets while the poor and middle class buy liabilities.
Absolutely.
Explain that a little bit more.
Sure. That comes from Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad author. And that book really impacted me. I think it came out in 99, right in there. And he was the first guy that got into my head that said, you don't need $1 million in savings. You just need more passive income per month than what your monthly nut is. And once you achieve that, you're free of jobs and schedules. And even better, while you're free of jobs and schedules, now you can use your time to find more of these assets that you could purchase. So the rich get richer without having to work a schedule. So there's good debt and there's bad debt. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out of your pocket. So for an example, a trailer park is an asset because it puts money in my pocket. A car is a liability because it takes money out of my pocket. It doesn't generate any income and it has just expenses. Now, if I'm to do a loan for a trailer park, that's what I call good debt, because even after I pay the loan mortgage, which my tenants actually pay, there's money left over that goes in my pocket. So that's good debt. So as much of that debt as you want to rack up is a good thing as long as your properties are solid and generating way more than what you need to make that mortgage payment. Bad debt is a car loan, because now you got to go out into the world and work, generate income to make that payment, because that car isn't giving you any payment. It's not putting money in your pocket. So that loan takes money out of your pocket. That's bad debt. So here's what they teach you. They teach you go to college, which is a big loan, get a good job, okay, and then buy the liabilities that your job will pay for, like a house, a car, your snowmobile. And that's what people do. Well, all of those things that they buy, they end up buying on credit, most people. And now that's bad debt. So when they have those debts, it's bad debt that don't give them any income. They're stuck in that job for their whole life. Rich people teach their kids to go out, buy a trailer park that pays you first, that funds your life. Now you're free to go out and use some of that money to buy the liabilities that make life fun, as long as your income stream that asset is paying for them. That's the difference. So the rich kids, they don't have to work jobs and schedules because they're taught to buy assets, businesses, income properties. Everybody else is taught get a job and then buy houses and cars and liabilities. I like liabilities like everybody, but I don't pay for them. My businesses pay for all that stuff.
Interesting. So we were talking a little bit offline about kind of higher education, the society's popular myth that the key to success and fulfillment is going to a four-year university, getting 150,000 at a minimum, right, in debt, and then you have a piece of paper that will allow you to have happiness in life.
Right.
Let's say John Doe and little Johnny, his son, his 18-year-old son, are there, and Mr. Doe says, Johnny, you got to go to a four-year university. That's the key to life. If you don't go, you're a loser. It's just, that's it. Johnny comes to you, Mike, and says, I'm 18. I have my whole life in front of me. My dad wants me to go to a four-year university. What do you tell Johnny?
Well, first I asked Johnny, well, what do you want out of it? What do you want to do? What lights you up? What topics, what subjects? And, if Johnny wanted to be a computer programmer for some reason, he doesn't need to go to college for that. He needs to buy a course online from LinkedIn to learn how to be a computer programmer. And he'll be done in 3 months and he's ready to generate income. Or Johnny could go to work for a computer programming company at an entry-level job, work hard, work his way up, and let them pay him a salary while he learns how to do the computer programming, and then he can bail out later and start up his own shop. I'd give Johnny some of these other options. Now, if Johnny wants to be a lawyer and he needs a 4-year degree, then Johnny, you're going to have to pony up the money and you're going to have to figure out and do it. But make sure that you want to be a lawyer, because a bunch of kids, over half of them, get their degree and they realize after they get their first job, hey, this stinks. I don't want to do this. So, Johnny's got to know what he wants and then what's the most effective, cheapest, fastest way to get it. And that's the conversation. And then college is just another option way out here that is, if you have to do it, it's there. And if you do it, you know exactly what you want. I've heard that half the kids never finish. And then of the half that do finish, about a third of them never get any academic gain at all because they've been partying. So the number of people that really get something worthwhile out of college is quite low. I'm not saying don't do it, but know what you want to do and why you're doing it.
I saw one study that, over half of kids who are ready to go to college can't choose a major. Then if they do choose it, it's based on, well, my dad was in finance, or Susie was in finance, or whatever. And then I think it's 80%. I might be mixing the numbers 50 and 80. Either way, it doesn't matter. It's still high. 80% change their major. And then, a lot of those people get to 30, 40, 50, and they come to me because they chose the wrong major and they've been set on a course that they hate. Right. But I'm convinced that the reason that the Johnnies of the world, when they're 18, are lost, it's not just John Sr. telling them, you got to go to college. I think it's this conditioning from the time they're 5 of everything is structured. You have kindergartners going to interviews to get into the better kindergarten. And then you have to be, quote unquote, well-rounded, right, to get into the best junior high and the better. And it's all geared toward college. And so that I was actually just talking to a friend, and he's about to turn 50. And he said, it's interesting. When I was 18, I had a friend in college who said he was going to travel to Europe. And I thought, you are dumb. You are stupid. I'm going to college and I'm going to get a job. And he said, now I'm about to turn 50. And you know what? Gosh, that guy was smart. And, but by the time you're 50, that's 30 years. His life's not wasted. He's very happy. But
yes, people drift way too long,
yeah.
Don't maximize their time. And the question I'd ask schools is, why can't you get a guy ready in 12 years of schooling, 13 if you count kindergarten, to earn income? Just compress stuff. Don't pretend you got 4 more years. And then they convince us that we have to pay that money ourselves to qualify for one of their jobs. And then the reward is if we get a good job, we have to work hard for 40 more years. And then the successful people, it's only about 5% of the people get to age 65 healthy and have the money they wanted and can retire the way they wanted. The other 95% are short. They're short of that. And some of them are way short. And it took your whole life. So I'd ask the school, my wife was on the school board, and I'd always say, you know, it's 180 days a year you guys go. Why doesn't anybody ask the question, well, what could we do to make this in 120 days? Or 150 days. They didn't, it was 180, so they filled the time. You know, instead of taking the education that they needed and jamming it in the time it needed, they just filled the space. So if you can't earn income by 12 years of school, school failed you.
Well, I think that there's a lot of, in Illinois, I know they were pushing pre-K or universal pre-K. And the reason they do that is because when you know, polls show regularly that especially middle-class families, they don't necessarily want more money. Maybe they say they want more money. They want more time. And any time you propose something that's going to make them feel like they have more time is a winner. Well, universal pre-K is basically daycare. Now, I'm going to get hate mail because of that, and I really don't care. But that's exactly why they push it. And so I remember there was a teacher strike in Chicago, and the teachers held the upper hand in it. You know why? Because parents had to stay home because their kid was out of school. So they have to figure out how to take care of them and get daycare. So if they decided to extend school over 3 months, they'd find a way to sell it. And parents would be like, yeah, that's wonderful. Do it.
Right.
And it's a shame. It's become daycare, and sure they'll fill the time, and then they'll claim, well, kids can't read because we need another hour or two.
Right.
And, you know.
Right. Yes.
It's an interesting system.
There's opportunity everywhere to fix everything, isn't there?
Yeah. No, absolutely. So one I want to talk about too. You handed out a booklet in Denver at No Longer Virtual, 101 Ways to Provide Exceptional Customer Service Today. Mm-hmm. And one question I have is, it's based on hundreds of interviews that you conducted with very large corporations. Right. Before we get into the pamphlet, tell me about that.
Well, it was a customer service newsletter. It was published every 2 weeks. It was Clement Communications, and a lot of people know them as the work safety poster people. They've got the cartoon characters, Herman, on the factory walls, et cetera. Well, they went into newsletters also, and they would actually sell these how-to customer service newsletters to companies all over the world. And I'm the guy that wrote it. And it was because of my McDonald's experience and my newspaper experience that they hired me for that gig. So my job was to have a lead story every issue about a success story with customer service. So I had to go out and find the top companies in the country and find something interesting and then talk them into talking to me, similar to what you're doing now. And I would do that on my phone down in Florida, and my wife would transcribe the interview that were recorded on a cassette tape recorder and a Radio Shack plug-in. And then I'd write the article. But I got to become even more of an expert just by talking to these folks. So over time, I did 157 issues of that newsletter over 6 years, and that was 157 of the best companies in the country.
So I love the fact that the very first thing you list under the header preparation, but it's the very first thing you list in the booklet, is awaken with gratitude. And gratitude's a theme that has come up a lot with guests on this podcast. Last week, I had an interview with a guy named Toph Evans, who is a suicide survivor. He's in Australia, and he grew up in Queensland, Australia, a lot of money, perfect weather near the mountains. And he said, despite the money and despite paradise, there's a mental health problem amongst kids 15 to 25 because they lack purpose in their life. He was an engineer. He was successful, but he was also a party animal, didn't know what he wanted to do, became depressed, had anxiety. He's turned it all around. And what he said, he does 100-kilometer ultra marathons now and raises money for charity. He's releasing a book next week. It's an excellent story, but he said the two things that helped him turn around 180, endurance, which mental and physical endurance, but gratitude. And so he says every single day, and I'm a coach, but every coach should have a coach. I have a coach who gave me something a while back, and every night before I go to bed, I write down 3 achievements for the day and 3 things I'm grateful for. And it's the last thing I read before I go to bed, and it's the first thing I read when I wake up in the morning. And when he first told me it, I thought it's going to be like the same thing every day. When you really think about it, it's little things. It's my 3-year-old smile in the morning. Things like that happen. It might be a conversation I had with someone at the supermarket. So you write, upon awakening, dwell on all the things for which you are grateful. I understand that from a personal fulfillment. You have it in a customer service booklet. Why is that?
Well, it puts you in the right frame of mind to serve. If you feel good in your own skin, you're going to be more giving when you're at work serving people. And it's as simple as that. You can only give what you have. So gratitude is filling the vessel so you have something to pour out of it during the day.
Interesting. You also have quit the coffee clutch, and misery likes company, right? And
Absolutely.
Not just in person. I see it on LinkedIn as well, where all of a sudden there's negativity and they latch together and their content becomes, recruiters are horrible, I can't find a job. And my heart goes out to them if they can't find a job.
Right.
That's their forward facing selves. I mean, you're selling yourself. And so that coffee clutch can be virtual, right? In addition to, and was it Richard Branson who says, invest in your people? Because if your people aren't happy, your customers aren't going to be happy.
Right.
And again, is it that it's that same, be grateful, have a good face.
Well,
On your face.
the downside of complaining too is that's what you're thinking about. And whatever you focus on expands in your life. We're magnets. So if you're thinking negative, bad stuff and the boss is a jerk, you're going to get more of that coming at you. And it just gets bigger and bigger in your windshield until one day that's all you see. And you say, I got to get out of here. And you quit. And all of a sudden you got no money and you're out in the street because you couldn't control your focus. If you focus on stuff that you want, you attract more of the want. And that gets bigger in your life. And then gratitude now is even easier. And then you just get caught in the whirlpool the good way. And more better stuff keeps coming your way. So it's focus. It's running your inner dialogue. So when you get lost in complaining, you've lost track of your inner dialogue. You've lost track of where you want to go. You've just put your brain on autopilot and it's going the wrong way. That's what's happening there.
Interesting. One thing that is, it's listed, but it's also a common theme through a number of the 101 ways, is actively listening. And that comes up in a number of ways throughout. But I did a video, gosh, it must have been in November, December on LinkedIn. And I said that I think it should be a college course and taught in elementary school, just the skill of actively listening. And a lot of people are like, well, I'm listening. It's like, no, you can tell while the person's talking, you're formulating what your response is going to be so you can talk over them. And I think you actually have that in terms of interrupting or speaking out. I can't remember how you did, but is that something that's gotten worse over the years, or has that just been a universal truth?
Oh, well, it's certainly worse. And it's, electronic devices. We all know people are addicted to looking at their Apple phones, so people skills are being lost. But if you really want to bond with somebody, you make eye contact and you're there, you're present, you're paying attention to what they're saying, and you're making yourself be different than most everybody else. You want to hear what they're saying. Your brain is quiet. You're not formulating a response because you don't even know what you're going to respond yet because you haven't heard it. So you got to keep your brain quiet. You got to focus. You make the eye contact. And you're letting the person know with verbal cues that I'm here, we're connected, I'm with you. And they'll pick up on that way more than what you say. But we've all heard a guy say his name and then you forget it in 3 seconds. It kind of shows you weren't listening and you were formulating what you were gonna say. So,
and that's another whole segment. There's about 3 or 4 or 5 different pieces related to remembering names. And I was just talking about that with someone. And again, I don't remember who I was talking about it with, It might have been at No Longer Virtual in terms of the skill of remembering names, because I'm horrible at it, and going to networking events. And I know there's tricks. You give some of the tricks here, but you shake your hand. And I've had that happen here where my wife introduced me to a friend's husband, and totally, because I wasn't listening. Right. So you give some tips on how to remember names, which I think is a skill that is helpful to a lot of people. So can you talk about some of those tips, or the best ones that you've seen or that you use?
Well, sure. A person's favorite word in the whole world is their name. So when they give you a name, that's like a gold nugget to connect with that person. So you got to right off the bat know that that's the most valuable thing I'm going to gain from this conversation is this person's name. So when they give you the name, you shake their hand, you repeat the name. Good to meet you, Bob. And then you make a mental picture of Bob. Who does he remind you with? If you can connect it to your brother who looks like him or somebody else that looks by him, now you've got it. And now as you're listening to Bob and it's your turn to respond again, you're using Bob's name again. So now you've used it 2 or 3 times. You've cemented it with a picture in your head, and you've gone into the whole exchange knowing that that's the most important word I'm going to capture in this whole conversation is this person's name.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a skill. I know it's one of my weaknesses, and I need to work on it. And so I read this, and I'm going to pin it to the inside of my sport coat when I go to a networking event. Okay, repeat names. One, you have a heading or a whole section here on email service, and the number 1 piece is respond quickly. One real weakness that I had, that when I was first building, I had a public relations and advertising agency that was very successful. But for the first 6 or 7 years, I felt like I had built a prison instead of a business. I took on the wrong types of clients. They were underpaying me for the value I was providing. And so there was a whole number of things I had to do. But one thing was that I became a slave to my inbox, just constantly checking. And I said, clients in the agency world can be like pets. When you condition them, they become used to it and they're okay. But as soon as you feed your pet at 3 p.m., 2 days in a row, they're going to expect dinner at 3 p.m. And so my clients, I made the mistake. Sometimes I'd respond to an email at 11 p.m. And then, you know what? I started getting emails at 11 p.m. and when I didn't respond. So I wanted to do something about it. And I wanted to batch the times at which I checked my emails for my own productivity, and because I wasn't getting work done. And I actually did a poll on LinkedIn. I sent it out via email, lawyers, people in a variety of different industries. I think I had about 40 people complete the survey. And it actually came back kind of the median or average or whatever was 2.5 hours response. Now, this wasn't a customer service type. It was an agency. I wasn't, helping. But that's what it came back. Some people said they just respond within the day. Some people said, oh, no, you got to respond within a half hour. But it was interesting. 2.5 hours was the median. And I started doing that. The world did not fall apart. The world did not, if there was an emergency, they texted me or they called me. But it was, so when you say respond quickly, is the word quickly dependent on the industry you're in, obviously?
And yes, and on your own personal boundaries and on what is being requested in the emails. You just don't want to be a bottleneck. You don't want to be the bottleneck that stops somebody from doing something. And most emails aren't putting you in that position. But the ones that do, those are the ones that need the response.
Got it. Excellent. Well, Mike, it's been fascinating. And I thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
This has been fun. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if people want to learn more about you, mikejohnson.biz, is that the best place to go? And of course, LinkedIn?
That's one website. Yep. And LinkedIn, and then perpetualsaturday.com is also all my passive income information is there.
Excellent. Now, if people want to find the 101 Ways pamphlet, is it on your website?
Nope. Yes, it would be. It would be at mikejohnson.biz. You'd find a way to find it on there.
Excellent. How about the Millionaire Letter?
That would be on perpetualsaturday.com, which is also on mikejohnson.biz.
.biz.
I've had
Excellent.
websites for 20 years and they're kind of connected.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I'm going to link to both those websites in the show notes on iTunes, Spotify, wherever it is, wherever the show notes appear, there'll be a link there. And I want to thank you so much for joining us. I mean, everything you're about is about the word freedom. And it's not just financial freedom. I mean, we've talked about freedom from the shackles of that popular myth that you put your head down, you're miserable for 40 years until you're 65 in the hopes that you're still alive, right? You have a different way. And thanks for sharing it with us today.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
Okay, thanks, Curt.